Okay, let's get started. We are now live. Welcome to the June 4th Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. This is our first meeting since February and our first online Zoom meeting. So welcome back, everyone. I ask for everyone's patience this evening as if we end up stumbling along at times, but we'll do our best.
Tell you when to start because I don't see it up yet.
Okay. I was about to jump the gun. Okay, so Catherine, you're going to need to turn the sound off in the background.
Oops, sorry.
Yep, thank you. Okay. It looks like we do not have any attendees at the moment, but if any member of the public would like to speak during oral communications on a subject not included in this evening's agenda, please raise your hand and you will be called on in a bit. These past few months have been very challenging for everyone, unprecedented at the risk of overusing the term. We're all continuing to chart new waters and adapt every day. As a commission, I think it's important for us to refocus and reconsider our efforts to support staff and engage with our community to creatively address our new challenges and gaps. As we hear about the impacts of the COVID-19 shelter-in-place restrictions and the new budget this evening, we can be heartened by the renewed emphasis and reliance on outdoor activities in our parks and open spaces. And I certainly have appreciated the tremendous amount of patience and goodwill I've observed in our community. And I think all of us can play a part in spreading that further. And so I think this evening, we'll look to work with staff and support them. Before we move further, I ask that we all take a moment of silence to remember George Floyd and to consider the calls across our nation for equity, inclusion, and respect for everyone. Thank you. Catherine, can you now please proceed with the roll call?
Chair Greenfield.
Here.
Vice Chair Cribbs.
Here.
Commissioner Lemaire.
Here.
Commissioner McCauley.
Here.
Commissioner Moss.
Here.
Commissioner Olson. Olson is absent. Commissioner Repdahl.
Here.
Councilmember Koo.
We can see her. She's connecting. I'll try again.
Councilmember Koo. Councilmember Koo is present.
Thank you. Now the next item on the agenda is changes, requests, deletions. Does anyone have anything they'd like to request regarding the agenda tonight? Okay, then we'll move on to oral communications. I do not see any attendees present at the moment, but if there is anyone who would like to speak on an item that's not on our agenda, please log in and raise your hand. And I don't see anyone. So Lom, can you please proceed with the department report?
Yes, thank you, Chair Greenfield. If I could start here, what we have are updates to statuses throughout the department. I would like to start with in our open space area, the Bailon's tide gate structure replacement project, which is managed by the Water District. And they have set a public outreach meeting for June 24th at 5:30. This is a virtual Zoom meeting. And then from there, from the public outreach, they will continue to proceed managing the project. Within the city, to address the heat and our recent weather, the city has established cooling centers, and the cooling centers will open depending on need. The first cooling center that opened was the one at Mitchell Park Community Center, and it will be serving our community with CDC guidelines in place, maintaining social distancing and safety, and the requirement of wearing a face covering is implemented as well. We also have a secondary cooling center should it be needed, and that would be the Art Center Auditorium. For information on cooling center hours, when they are open, when they're closed, and of course it depends on the heat. We ask people to go to the city's website at cityofpaloalto.org/cooling centers for center hours, operation hours, for safety tips, and also general tips on how and resources how to stay cool at home. The next item is the city of Palo Alto issued a curfew order, which started on June 2nd, and it was planned to go through the morning of Thursday, June 11th. The curfew is set from 8:30 to 5 a.m. However, the curfew was terminated as of 5 a.m. this morning, June 4th. During the time of the curfew restricted that no person shall be on the public street, road, or sidewalks, alleys, and plazas, and right-of-ways. And this also included the Palo Alto open space preserves. The termination of the order was established by the city manager and the police chief, and as mentioned before, it terminated this morning. The city council's meeting this past Monday did have a community message of hope, and this message was shared by our city manager, Ed Shikata, our police chief, Robert Johnson, and Reverend Kamola Smith, and Pastor Paul Baines as well. And this message, community of hope message, was a message calling for inclusion. And anyone interested in that, we asked them to go to the city's webpage in the news section here. Currently, our Planning and Community Environment Department is working on a safe parking program with the county. And the safe parking program they like to implement at the temporary fire station adjacent to the Bailon's Athletic Center on Gang Road. This is a safe parking program for the unhoused. And this is, although this area is adjacent to the Bailon's Athletic Center, it is not on parkland. It is separated from the athletic center with fencing. The way the program looks to be planned out, and of course it is still in the works, is that the city would lease the land to the county for the county to operate the safe parking program. The county would then hire a contractor to manage the program. The city would not be expected to be involved in the program, nor would the city be expected to fund the program. Our participation would be just leasing the land to the county. Our understanding is that this program could start as soon as within a month. However, logistically, it may take a little bit longer to plan out. It may take 2 or 3 months to plan it out. How long the safe parking program will be in place is to be determined at this time. And the number of vehicles that will be allowed to park there is estimated to be between 15 to 25. Vehicles are allowed to stay all day, 24/7, and with in and out privileges. Participants who want to enroll in the program will be screened by the county. This site, where the old fire station is, was chosen over the Los Altos treatment plant site due to the Los Altos treatment plant site having limited access to resources such as water and power. This program is through the planning department, and they do not at present plan on bringing this to the commission, the Parks and Rec Commission, nor do they plan on conducting public outreach. Correction, let me say that. They do plan on conducting public outreach through the Parks and Rec Commission. One of our art structures at the Art Center along Embarcadero Road, which is the Patrick Dougherty sculpture called Whiplash. This is the willow piece. it has the structure has weakened and as part of it has come down. As a result, the structure has been determined to come to the end of its life. We previously thought that it could last a little longer. However, due to part of it falling down, we are making plans to remove it. Removal of the structure is scheduled to begin next week. Later on, we have an update for you in regards to the Cubberley plan, and I believe Kristen will be updating us on that. Next, I'd like to move into review of COVID-19 impacts to our programs here. Within we've had some.
Excuse me, Lom.
Yes.
I think we're going to address the COVID-19 impacts as part of the business item discussions.
Sure.
And so if you could hold off on that and any budget impacts, that would be great.
I will do that.
Okay. And is there anything you would like to add, or we can have Kristen give us an update on Cubberley?
I have updates. My updates following will be COVID-19, summer camps, and CIPs and budget reductions. I can hold those as well.
Why don't you go ahead with summer camps and CIP if that's not tied directly into the budget reductions. If you think it's better to talk about it with the budget, you can talk about that in the other item as well.
I'll hold the CIPs for the budget discussion, and at this time, then I'll sort of update on summer camps if I may.
Please.
Yes, thank you. So this summer, we will the Community Service Department will be offering a mixture of in-person camps and virtual camps. We're excited. Our council season will start June 15th. We'll be offering on-site in-person summer camps. They are all modified to adhere to the county guidelines. And these guidelines will restrict the campers to a stable group of 12 campers per camp. And those camps, however, will need to run for 3 weeks per the county guidelines as the one stable group of participants and instructors. We are offering camps in a variety of disciplines, ranging from traditional recreation camps to sports camps to science technology camps. We also have specialty camps with the Arts Center, with Children's Theater and Junior Museum and Zoo. Our website is up and running for registration at this time. In regards to safety guidelines, as mentioned, we're following the county guidelines. We will have daily wellness checks for our participants and our staff. We'll have physical social distancing in place. We'll have hand washing procedures in place as well, and just increased custodial cleaning. As mentioned earlier, the camps will need to run for 3 weeks. At our Recanata pool, we will be offering a Camp Recanata as well, and this is through our service provider, the Palo Alto Swim as well. And plus, in addition to the summer camp, swim camp we also, the pool itself will be open to the public, and it will be open this Saturday, June 6th. The opening, though, is just for lap swim. Those are the in-person programs that we have. We will also be offering virtual classes and camps. Our virtual classes and camps range from virtual classes for adults in the arts, and we will also have camps for youth and teens. In particular, we do have a combined youth and teen program. It's a virtual camp where the teens will be collaborating with our adult ceramics program. In addition to that, our Teens Art Council and also Teen Services will resume. They are set to schedule a co-hosting an open mic at the Art Center starting tomorrow night, June 5th. In addition to the recreation camps and the arts camps, we will also be we've expanded the use of our sport athletic field as well. So now we have field use that now expands beyond one household. We now permit field use for up to 2 households, both in our athletic fields and our courts, including tennis courts and pickleball courts. And we also have some, we will be offering summer camps for sports camps as well. And that's my update on the camp programs this summer.
Thank you. Maybe we could ask, see if any commissioners have any questions for you before we move on to Kristen. Any commissioners have any questions for Long? David?
Did you say that there's a limit for the on-site one? Did you say there's a limit to how many participants so that you can maintain social distancing?
Yes, the limit is not necessary for social distancing. It's all inclusive of guidelines that are enacted by the county, and it's limited to 12 participants,
Okay.
not including the instructors.
Okay. And then the second thing is the June 24th meeting that you mentioned at the very, very beginning. What was that for?
Yes, the tide gate in the Baylands Preserve, it needs replacement. It is a major multi-year project that is managed by the Valley Water District.
Okay. So if we want to get on that, if we want to get to that, Catherine will send us update.
Yes, we will do that.
Okay. And then do you want to mention that you opened the tennis courts and the pickleball courts a couple weeks ago or a week ago?
Yes, in early May, sometime around the first week of May, the county order was updated to allow the court use by single households. And the city then subsequently opened it up. We will now, starting tomorrow, open up the courts to up to 2 household use.
Right. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Chair, it's Ann. I just would like to, I know all of us would like to compliment the staff on this quick pivot and response to the new regulations from the county. When Lamb was going through the list of programs for kids and adults, it's amazing that you all have been able to do this in such a short time. So I would really commend you, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners feel that way too. So job well done. It'll be really interesting to see how it all pans out. So thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of our Recreation Program and Arts Center Program coordinators and our administrative staff who've all been a part of this, I would like to say thank you on their behalf.
Thank you. Anyone else? Or Jeff Lemare?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Lamb, I appreciate the update, and I appreciate everything the staff has been able to do during these times and thinking of different solutions, and especially being able to get recreation opportunities and camps going again. I know it's very important, especially for people needing to go back to work, essential workers and so forth. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the acknowledgement.
I have a couple of quick questions, Lom. As far as the number of camps and effectively seats at camps, how does the offering this year compare to last year? I know there's certainly complexities with requiring the in-person camps to be 3 weeks long with 12 people. And so that's going to limit who's going to want to sign up for camps and limit what the offerings can be. But and may be difficult to answer that considering the in-person camps with the virtual classes. But however you'd like to try to take a stab at that.
I probably could not, other than to say, right, the capacity restriction. There's also the restriction of staffing being in the same camp. And there's also the restriction that a participant could not cross camps concurrently. So before we could offer someone to participate perhaps in a half-day camp in the morning. It could be like a recreation camp or an arts camp or a theater camp, and then in the afternoon they could participate in another camp or a sports camp as such. But with the guidelines here, we are not able to offer that. So that drastically reduces the capacity. And then add on that the only 12 cohorts that are remain together in 3 weeks. I don't have a better description of in regards to, I think what you really were looking for is capacity wise overall. Unfortunately, I don't have a comparison for that.
Well, thank you. I certainly echo the rest of the commission's comments that we appreciate how quickly staff has been able to turn around on this. And I know it's very difficult, and taking a step back, I want to thank staff for all of the efforts they've made over the past few months. I know it's been a tremendous workload that you've had on you, and I think you've done it in a very thoughtful manner, as is always the case. Keith, I see that your hand was up and I missed that, so I'll give you a chance to go and then I'll continue.
Yeah, I was just curious, the pickleball and the courts, how much autonomy do we have in the decisions, and how many of these decisions being made by the county and us being told what to do?
Thank you for the question. The city overall has been following the guidelines of the county. And as a county eases restrictions, we've been working quickly to implement them. Some of the restrictions took us a few days after the county green lighted to prepare and implement. Some of them have taken us up to a week to implement. But the overall guidelines that we follow to implement are the county guidelines.
Okay, so for example, the 1 household versus 2 household, that was specifically required by the county?
That's correct.
Okay.
Lamb, may I also ask about, you said that the pool was open for lap swimming. I'm delighted to hear that. And will the residents or people coming to the pool be making a reservation in advance for the lane?
I am not aware of an advanced reservation. I can follow up and respond to you separately if you'd like.
Great, thank you.
I have an answer to that, Commissioner Cribb. So there is a, Palo Alto Slip and Sport has a very specific protocol that will include how people enter the facility. They will reserve a lane. They get so much time in that lane, and then when the time is called, they get out of the lane and exit the pool area, and then the next group comes in. So it's much more detailed than that, but that's the summary.
No, that's excellent, and I'm really happy to hear that. So that's very, very good protocol. So good.
And will they do a health check too?
No, they won't do a health check, and that's something we've talked about within the city as well. I mean, we do that with our employees, for essential employees when they come to work, but there will be signage that says if you're feeling ill or have these symptoms, please do not use the pool. But checks such as temperature checks, a lot of people can be test positive for the virus and not have any symptoms. So doing something like a temperature check just isn't necessarily a valid way to determine if someone has tested positive or is carrying the virus.
I had another question, Lom, regarding the open mic at the Art Center. I wasn't clear. Is that a virtual event or that's an in-person event?
Let me see if I can get that.
It's virtual.
Virtual. Okay. So at the Art Center is a little confusing.
I apologize.
Yeah, that's good.
One more thing, you should mention for the record that the Foothills and Arrastradero were opened again to cars, I think a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
Last weekend was the first.
Right.
Week.
How did that go?
Yes, I can update now, Chair Greenfield, or would you like me to hold that for COVID-19 impact updates?
Sure, we can wait on that. That's good.
Thank you.
And I have one more question regarding the the new guidelines for two households and ball sports, whether it's a field sports or tennis and pickleball, how is that being communicated? Is it going out through the daily Palo Alto update? And are we reaching out to Monica and the pickleball community? And how about the soccer clubs? I guess this would officially allow the a coaching clinic between a soccer coach and a solo player or siblings to be formally permitted.
Yes, the city is communicating this information via several methods. The daily report that you referred to, in particular, has announced that. I know for sure it was in today's announcement. I'm not sure whether it was in yesterday's announcement. And in addition to that, our social media channels are also being used to communicate this information.
That's great. This change will certainly make a lot of people happy in the manners that they're working. They're trying to get out and exercise and have some outdoor recreation opportunities. It opens up a lot more possibilities.
Yes.
Okay, if there's no more questions, we can move on to Kristen's update on Cubberley.
Did Commissioner Rectal have a question or no?
Sorry, I did put my hand down.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay.
I think you got his question.
Micromanage the meeting.
Okay,
Okay, so good evening, Commissioners. Kristen O'Kane, Community Services Department, and Councilmember Koo. It's nice to see all of you. It's been way too long. Chair Greenfield had asked me to provide an update on the Cubberley Community Center and where we are with our, I'm assuming that you were specifically referring to our lease with the school district. So you probably are all aware that the lease between the school district and the city is changing, likely changing quite significantly. The Board of Education has already approved a revised lease agreement, and this lease limits the amount of space that the city will have access to. So the city will continue to lease the athletic fields, the gyms, the pavilion, and the theater. And we will temporarily be leasing the auditorium because that's the space where the Junior Museum and Zoo currently resides until they move into their new space. There's also an additional space which is in the S building, and that is the Children's Preschool Center. And the reason that's included is because half of that organization is on city property and the other half is on school district property. So the easiest thing to do in this short time frame was just to include that into the city's lease. So we are bringing this to City Council on June 15th. And if it is approved, well, I guess regardless if it's approved or not, we've already issued notices to all the tenants who the city had leases with on the school district property, as well as all of the renters who have rental permits on the school district property. We've advised them that they will no longer have space as of July 1st on the school district property. This impacted, initially we thought it was 10 long-term tenants, but we've now, due to keeping the children's preschool and another group that uses a room that's attached to the pavilion, we've reduced it down to 7 groups or tenants who will be impacted. And I have been working with Cubberley staff to speak with those tenants. We're speaking with them nearly daily. We're meeting them out at Cubberley and showing them potential locations where they could move, or trying to connect them with other community organizations that might have space for them. As of today, we have been able to offer all of those tenants, or to show all of those tenants an alternate space, and we're working with them to see if it is a space that they want, and you know, just if that will work for them and the logistics behind that. For the renters, we're in a similar situation. We are having conversations with the school district, and they are now contemplating more that it might make sense for them to allow some of those renters to continue renting on the school district property. Nothing is final and nothing is confirmed. They're just having those conversations with those renters, which is very positive news. And I am personally very grateful that they're taking that step, because we just don't have enough space on the city's 8 acres to accommodate everybody. But we're doing our best, and one thing I want to say is just how much I appreciate how all of the tenants and the renters have just, this was such a short time frame for them. It came as a shock, and they have all been just amazing to work with and gracious and kind to us. And I really, really appreciate that. We're doing our best to get everyone situated so that they can get their programs up and running real soon. Any questions for me, or any additional information you'd like?
Well, thank you, Kristen. I appreciate I know you've been working very hard on this, and I know it's been a very consuming effort, and it's not an ideal situation. It's not a situation that any of us wanted to be in, and I think you've handled it with a lot of class for the city, and we're all appreciative of that. And I know on behalf of the commission, we're here and interested to help in any way we can with this effort. Does anyone have any specific questions for Kristen?
Yeah, I'm amazed that you were able to, in such a short time, try to react and come up with a different situation. How many of the existing city tenants had extra space that they were willing to give up so that you could move some of these people over? They must all have been impacted, right?
So the only organization that we did, when I communicated with all of the Cubberley tenants, I said, if you're on the city side, this doesn't really impact you. Although if you do have an additional space and you feel like you could either share it or consolidate some of your space to make room for a tenant who would otherwise, be displaced, we would really appreciate that. Most organizations are feeling like they either need the space they have or they need more space, because they want to try and do the same programming they had, but spread people out so that there isn't as much close contact. Mm-hmm. The organization that has been really working with us is the Friends of the Palo Alto Library. They have quite a bit of space at Cubberley, and they do a lot for the Palo Alto libraries and provide a lot of funding for Palo Alto libraries. So, they need that space for their donations, but they've been working with us to hopefully consolidate some of their space and free up a little bit of it so that another tenant could relocate.
Yeah, I think they had 2 trailers and they might be able to give up one, but I'm not sure. And are there any plans to bring portables onto the city side, that parking lot over on the north side?
It's something that we've, as we were looking at every possible option that might be a viable solution, that was definitely one that we looked at. And it's something we still may be able to, we still might want to look into in the future, but for the short term, we're trying to get everyone situated. And then as things either become more available or we have other options, we can still move people to something that suits them better. But for right now, that coordination, we haven't moved on, I guess.
All right. And then the last question is, when does the JMZ expect to be moving their animals to the new site?
So they plan to open the new facility to the public in March. That means that they need to have the animals there and quarantined, and, you know, staff being trained on how to feed and interact with the animals about 6 months in advance. So they will be starting to move over in the fall, but they likely will be staying to some degree at Cubberley till the end of the calendar year.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had.
Keith?
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the city's in a really tough position here, but this seems like a draconian measure. There's such huge community impacts. I think I would search other places to save the money. I don't know how much you're saving by cutting this lease, but it doesn't seem to be worth the disruption that you're causing the community.
So I understand where you're coming from, and thank you for raising that. This really has been collaborative discussions between the school district and the city. So, and I don't want to speak for the school district, but they will be utilizing the space at Cubberley. And part of that, my understanding, is that they need additional space to allow students and staff to be at a greater distance apart. So this did not happen lightly by any means. And there were a lot of conversations between the school district and the staff, and this was really a collaborative partnership to resolve several issues related to funding, but also just needing the school district needing space as well.
My impression is that this is driven by the city. You're saying that's not necessarily the case?
It was developed through conversations between the city and the school district.
Any other questions?
Doesn't the city need to do the same thing that the school district is doing and expand their workspaces too?
We're in the process of developing what we call recovery plans for returning to work. Each department is in the process of preparing those. So it's still something that's in progress right now. And we're working with our emergency operations center and facilities and the city manager's office to finalize those, and then try to understand what we need to be safe and return to work, or maybe in some cases not return to the office for a while for those that can continue to successfully work remotely.
Anyone else? I have one quick question. It's just a clarification, Kristen.
Sure.
The tennis courts, are those part of city property, or are they considered part of fields on the school property? What's the status with them?
The tennis courts are on city property already.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That's the end of the outside edge of the tennis court is where the city's property ends.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Thank you, Kristen and Lom. And now we'll move on to the next item, which is essentially going to be a continuation of the department report. Thank you for working in this is perhaps an awkward, skewed manner. The reason I asked that sorry, we're going to go to the approval of the draft minutes first, and then we'll continue with the staff report on COVID-19 shelter-in-place impacts and financial impacts. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the draft minutes. Do I have a motion on this?
I so move.
I second.
Okay, so Keith moves and David seconds. I'm going to ask each commissioner to vote verbally. So we'll start with Vice Chair Cribbs.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Commissioner Lemaire,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Moss,
Yes.
Commissioner McCauley, let's pass on Commissioner McCauley for the moment. Commissioner Reckdahl
Yes.
and Commissioner McCauley. He may have dropped off for the moment. Okay, so the motion carries 5-0. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the review of the COVID-19 shelter-in-place impacts and the financial impacts on the community. Before we move on to that, Councilmember Koo, I just want to confirm your audio is working. And is there anything you'd like to add?
Audio is working. Thank you so much for checking in with me. I'm sorry. I was a little bit tardy over there. Nothing to add. Thank you so much for the updates.
No problem. Thank you.
Nice to see all of you.
And you as well. Okay, and now we'll move on to the continuation of the department report. And just to let you know, the reason I'd asked that this be structured in this manner is just so that the agenda would be a little bit more transparent in terms of what we were discussing. That if it just said department report, it wouldn't be. I didn't feel like it would be as clear. I thought it was worth making a little bit more identifiable that we're in this recap and restart meeting, that we're reviewing where we are and then considering how to move forward. So if you'd like to continue with it on this item, please, Lom.
Thank you, Chair Greenfield, and I apologize for not identifying myself earlier. I'm Lam Do, Superintendent in Open Space, Parks and Golf, and today I'm standing in for our Community Services Assistant Director, Darren Anderson. Thank you. To continue the staff report, the department report earlier, we have the impact of COVID-19 to our programs. And let me start with the impact in our open space areas. Starting with the additional visitation during the shelter in place to all of our open space preserves. We needed to ensure that social distancing was in place. So as a result, we, along with multiple other open space jurisdictions throughout the region, closed our parking lots. We still kept the preserves open to those that could either walk, hike, or bike in. And we slowly phased reopening of the preserves as mentioned earlier. So what we have is the, and so I apologize, sir. With our closures, we also closed amenities in the facilities as well. When we closed down the parking lots, we also closed down the park benches, drinking fountains, and we also closed our restrooms. And these were all in line with county health orders or interpretations of the county health orders to ensure public safety. As we learned more and as the county advises more, we too slowly reopened our facilities in the open space areas. We started with reopening our parking lots on weekdays, and then we moved to phasing in opening of our parking lots, various preserves on weekends. And then now all of our preserves are open, parking lots are open all days of the week. However, we still have some facilities in there that are closed. As mentioned, picnic areas, benches, barbecues, drinking fountains are closed. We did reopen our restrooms, however. In regards to visitation that we've experienced, our weekday visitation at the Baylands continues to be at pre-COVID levels. We're experiencing about 75 to 100 cars per hour on weekdays, and this is in the Baylands Preserve. On weekends, we're experiencing about 150 cars per hour during the peak times. Looking at, for example, this past May 31st, we opened our parking lots and for the first time on the weekends, the Big C parking lot, which holds about 30 vehicles roughly, was consistently full throughout the day. We turned away probably at least 50 cars roughly each hour, and we had to redirect them to the other lots within the Baylands. However, we were able to facilitate, for the most part, parking. It was just through using other lots and redirecting visitors. For Foothills Park, last Saturday we had, and same thing, we reopened our all of our parking lots. Last Saturday we had 245 vehicles and roughly about 580 visitors on this past Saturday. And this number was achieved despite the morning kind of being a little bit breezy and sort of showery conditions as well. We did have to, however, turn away about 100 visitors at the front gate. 7 of those 100 visitors that were turned away were for having dogs. And the others presumably were due to being non-residents. And so that is a high number for a typical weekend for us. At the Pearson Raster Preserve, this one in general has throughout the shelter in place order has always remained a high visitation area. Whether the parking lot was closed or whether the parking lot's open, it continues to be quite popular for not just those that are hiking, but also those that are mountain biking as well. Much of our operations during this time was with a full staffing level within our open space staff. In addition to that, we brought in staff from our other program areas in community services. And then also we received quite a significant amount of assistance in which we want to acknowledge the police department, in particular Captain Zach Perone, and also all of the community service officers in the police department who helped us weekdays and weekends managing visitors and traffic for several weeks. So I think a lot of that would not have been possible without the assistance of the police department and the assistance of other staff within the community service department. The impact in our parks also started out with closures. We closed courts, tennis, pickleball, basketball courts. We closed picnic areas, we closed park benches. Athletic fields were closed as well, and it's just that playgrounds were closed. We, however, did leave in the park the restrooms open. Part of the reason the restrooms were left open is because these are parks in our urban areas, and we do have unhoused, and as a result, it's difficult for them to find restrooms during the shelter in place because all other businesses are also closed. And so we left the restrooms in our parks open. As the county health orders went through multiple iterations, we were slowly reopened some facilities. And previously mentioned in early mid-May, we reopened our courts, being basketball, pickleball, and tennis courts, and also athletic fields. We opened it under limited and restricted use per the county guidelines, and at the time, they were restricted to single households usage. And that will change starting tomorrow. We will go to usage by up to 2 households. However, playgrounds is one of the areas where we have not reopened, and that has not been addressed by us, nor has it been addressed by the county. And so as a result, playgrounds remains closed. In regards to our dog parks, initially dog parks were open, and then one of the changes to the county orders was to close the dog parks. So we proceeded to close them. And now we're happy to report that our dog parks will reopen tomorrow. with social distance in place, and also we are still requiring the use of face covering for any visitors in our dog parks. So all our dog parks will reopen starting tomorrow, the 5th. Excuse me here. I mentioned the impact on our recreation programs previously in our summer camps. However, there were still our existing spring classes and camps, spring classes only. And due to the shelter-in-place order, we canceled all of our spring classes. We did make a pivot and a switch to some virtual programming. As understandably, however, we're not able to offer full slate. So, and now we're still looking towards our summer programs, continuing the virtual program as well. However, we've added some in-person camps, as previously mentioned. COVID-19 impact was also impacted our Rick Donner pool. That was also another facility that we closed down. However, we are reopening it this starting Saturday, June 6th, and to lap swim. And then on Monday, we'll reopen it to camps as well. So kind of that's the physical impacts to our facilities and our classes. There's the other side of that, which are the budget reductions and the impact that we have throughout the city.
Excuse me, Lom. Before we move on to the financial impacts, do any commissioners have any questions about that? What the items that Lom has just discussed?
I have a quick question. I maybe missed this. Golf course, what's the status on the golf course?
I apologize for omitting the golf course. Our golf course was another facility that closed down as soon as the shelter-in-place was put in place on March 16th or March 17th. And the golf course remained closed until the shelter-in-place order was modified by the county. And we reopened it on May 17th or May 13th, one of those 2 days. I apologize for not recalling exactly. And we reopened it at the time to single play per the county guidelines as well.
Not even single person or single household?
It was open to single individual play. And technically that's actually the county guidelines defaulted to the state guidelines. To single individual play.
And now with the playing fields being open to 2 households and pickleball and stuff, are we having 2 households for the golf courses?
Yes, we are transitioning to that as well.
And so that starts tomorrow?
Correct.
Okay. And how's the play? Are we getting people out there or is it empty?
It is not empty, and golf just remains the same. It's dependent on the weather. So we've been reopened now for about 3 weeks. The first week and a half, I'd say the first few days we were ramping up. By the 4th or 5th day, we had a full tee sheet. Keep in mind, this is a full tee sheet with single individual play, not necessarily group play. So, capacity-wise, it's much more limited. And then we had not this most recent heat wave come in, but about a week and a half ago, we had some strong warm days that reduced our golf course play. And it has since resumed, however. Now, I don't know for the past 2 or 3 days how the tee sheet is looking. I haven't had a chance to get an update on that.
Okay, so just to be clear, you can have 2 households and you can have a full foursome, or are we limited to 2 people?
The county guidelines allows for up to a foursome.
Okay.
Well, technically, the county guidelines does not say up to a foursome. It just says 2 households. Golf as a sport has been grouped up to a foursome in general.
Okay. And how does the lease work? Who's taking the hit?
The operator.
The loss of revenue.
Yes, the operator of the golf course unfortunately incurred the financial losses, and the operator is OB Sports. They're the ones that lease the cafe.
Okay, and so they have a fixed payments that they're giving us?
That is correct.
Okay. And there was nothing in the contract that would allow them to either cut their lease or decrease those payments for certain contingencies?
Not contractually.
Okay. And so it all looks like they're going to keep their lease and keep on operating it, and we're not going to have any interruptions?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Because that would be bad to have the golf course, which we paid so much money for, sitting empty and not being used if the operator pulled out.
So we have two separate agreements with the operator. As mentioned, and as you inquired, the Bailon's Cafe is leased by them and operated by them. As for the golf course and its practice facilities, those are operated by them on the city's behalf, however. So they are a contracted management company for the course and the practice areas under a separate contract from the lease that they have for the cafe.
Thank you.
So to clarify on that real quickly, Lom, the operator is absorbing the loss on the cafe, but is the city absorbing the loss on the golf course, or the?
That's correct.
Okay. Commissioner Moss, I see your hand is up.
Because we spent so much time earlier this year talking about opening Foothills to non-residents in a controlled fashion, this period has been a big experiment to see just what kind of impact we could have if we relaxed our controls. And you can see with so many cars showing up, and you turned away 100 visitors, 93 of which were non-residents, that shows how valuable and how needed these open spaces are, and will probably help to inform us how to open the park up, in that controlled fashion. I don't want to lose these statistics. Every statistic that you have from this period, it would be nice to feed to the subcommittee so that we don't lose it. We don't lose that. It's really important. That's all.
Yes, our ranger staff at Foothills does have a record list, and we will continue to the extent we're able to track this information.
Thank you. Questions from any other commissioners? Commissioner Lemaire, anything?
No.
Oh, thank you. I have just one question, Lom. As far as face masks, face coverings being required, does this only apply to the dog parks? Is there any other outdoor activity where face coverings are required?
I think it's dependent upon how activity is determined. The city's ordinance on face covering is a blanket. It's both outdoors upon entering a business. There are exceptions to recreational athletic participation. There is that exception to the requirement of the face covering. So I think and as a result, that is why we the face covering is the requirement for the dog parks, because it's not necessarily an athletic endeavor. However, I would also like to point out that it's in particular, the face covering is a requirement that the county has stated as a condition of reopening dog parks. So even independent of whether or not the city had our own ordinance in place, it is a requirement of the county's update starting effective tomorrow for dog parks.
Thank you. That's helpful to understand. And so gatherings are still not officially permitted under the shelter-in-place guidelines. I mean, the people at dog parks are kind of gathering as they're.
That's correct. The county is allowing the dog parks to reopen, and we have posted signage for both face coverings and signage of social distancing is a requirement. And we've asked, the signage states that if you are unable to maintain the social distancing of 6 feet, that we ask them to not enter the dog park.
Thank you. And just one more clarification. I know you made this clear regarding the open spaces, but benches and picnic areas remain closed in the parks as well as well as in the open spaces.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And barbecues and drinking fountains as well.
Oh, yes, along the same lines.
Right. Okay, thank you. If there's no other questions, if you could please proceed to the.
I have one more, and that is.
I'm sorry, I see some hands up. I'm working on seeing those hands. I see you too, Ryan. Go ahead, David.
Not only, well, I'm also very interested in the statistics of how many staff you really needed to manage the open spaces during this incredibly busy period. You talked about needing police to back up the entire force of rangers. And so I want to make sure that we know what kind of staff is really needed to open up the park to a greater audience. I take my hat off to you for being able to marshal these resources on very short notice. I don't think we anticipated how much volume we were going to get, but the fact that you were able to pull all these people together and maintain some kind of order was really amazing.
Yes, we'll get that information. We have that information of staffing levels.
No, that's a good suggestion, and I do really appreciate how staff has been able to pull this together. And I know part of this is kind of the lost concept of a weekend and working a lot of hours to fill the gaps, and the guidelines are ever changing. It's a perfect example of how things changing in tomorrow. So every couple of weeks, it's a new landscape, and I know that staff has to then go to the effort of interpreting what these changes in official policies mean with respect to various recreation activities and facilities around the city.
Chair Greenfield, I'd just like to add a little bit to the staffing of open space areas. So some of community services staff are just the nature of the work they do. They're unable to work remotely. So we were able to redeploy many of those staff to help the rangers in the open space areas, just crowd control, reminding people to stay 6 feet apart, traffic control, things like that. So that was a really good way to redeploy staff who otherwise, may not have work that they could easily do remotely.
Thank you. That's great to hear that we're able to find ways to redeploy the staff in areas that are certainly a high need in these past few months. Commissioner McCauley, you have some questions. Ryan, you're muted.
There we go. Forgive me. I'm dialed in via my phone for the audio. So apologies for the Bueller moment earlier. I intended to vote yes for the approval of the minutes, and sorry that I got disconnected for a
moment. No problem. Understood. So no further questions?
No, nothing further.
Thank you. Lom, can you go ahead with the financial impacts now then? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Greenfield. And as I speak about the COVID-19 impacts on our programs, I'm going to ask Director O'Kane and Council Member Koo to correct me if I misstep or misspeak. The budget impacts for our open space areas are wide-ranging, and much of this is in response to the city's estimated $20 million financial impact citywide in the current fiscal year. And then the city was also looking at a projected $39 million fiscal recovery impact in next fiscal year 21. So as a result, all departments were asked to take a look at our budgets and determine where we could make changes and reductions. And so the community service department as a whole was tasked, and we have reductions in several areas here. So I'll start with open space. In our open space areas, we have service level reductions, and starting with the Bailon's Nature Center. We'll be reducing our staffing at the Nature Center by 10,000. The impact of that is that the public visitation areas to the Bailon's Nature Center will be reduced to address that and backfill some of that loss. We have worked with the environment volunteers, and they have generously agreed to help support us with staffing at the Bailon's Nature Center to still provide some visitation hours. And then what will happen then is the staff will sort of make up for the rest. This offered through with the environment volunteers allows us to maintain field trips and programming at the Nature Center, despite having to reduce the budget there. We are now looking at reduced hours and possibly reduced days. We don't know the exact details of how we're going to be able to work this out yet, but we do feel that we're confident that we can offer at minimum Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday hours, and perhaps even more. And those would correlate to the typical visitation needs of the high visitation needs of the area. In regards to contract expenses in our open space areas and our park maintenance areas as well, we've had reductions in across the board. Our largest reduction is a reduction to our park landscape maintenance. And this is a large reduction. It's a 26% reduction of approximately $274,000. And the contract is over $1 million. So sort of in looking at what does that mean when we reduce the contract by over a quarter. This will be primarily a reduction in the frequency of maintenance. Where parks are maintained X number of days, we will maintain it fewer days per week. So for example, parks that were serviced 3 times a week, we're going to be reducing that to service 1 time a week. This will impact parks such as El Palo Alto, Mayfield Park, Sarah Wallace Park, Washara Park, in addition to that, Lynn Plaza and Coswell Plaza. Some city facilities, which previously were landscapes and maintained 5 days a week, will now be reduced to 3 times a week. And these facilities include City Hall, our Mitchell Park Community Center, and our library, and our Lucy Stern Center as well. Some sites, small sites that were maintained 3 times a week will now be reduced to maintain twice a week. And these facilities are those such as the Children's Theater and the Arts Center. And then some sites that were maintained only once per week will be reduced down to be maintained only once per month. And these sites include our fire stations.
What do you mean when you say maintained? Is that sweeping and leaves, or is it also like garbage collection?
This is primarily leaves and hedge maintenance and safety maintenance and pathway maintenance. The litter removal, we are addressing to maintain an appropriate level. We may have some instances where it may overflow, but we'll address it as it comes. And we will try to do our best to reduce the overall impact and the appearance. Granted that things will look a little different. Our park maintenance contract also includes maintenance of our road medians. And so this, though, however, does have an impact in regards to loose litter at the medians. So this is a little bit different from maintaining our parks and facilities. With the reduction in maintaining our road medians, weed removal will not be as often, and neither will litter removal be as often. So there will be an aesthetic change to that. And then one other area that our parks maintenance contract also includes is our tennis courts cleaning, which previously would have been cleaned twice a month, and now they're only cleaned once a month. The cleaning of this varies from a blowing or even a washing of the courts. And these examples are to help us achieve the 26% reduction or the $274,000 reduction in the maintenance contract. But in the reality, to achieve that, we also have some areas where we will no longer be performing the work by the contract service provider, and the work will now transition to staff. So Big Speed does have an annual mowing that is done by the contractor. That's been completely removed from the contract. So now our rangers will perform the mowing. However, they will not be able to do the mowing in full scale. So we're going to do the some minimal mowing to keep the trails clear, but otherwise the area would not be mowed. We'll focus, though, however, our ranger staff on the trails in particular. There were some also services that were added to the contract when it was not there initially. However, we will now need to unfortunately remove them despite wanting to previously add them. There was additional weekend trash pickup for the Magical Bridge Playground. Unfortunately, we do need to remove the additional weekend trash pickup. So it'll revert back to how it originally was, where the trash pickup resumes on Mondays. Previously, to address this, we also added additional trash cans. So we're gonna go back to having the full slate of trash cans and resuming on Monday trash pickup. And then some of our field maintenance, athletic field, playing field maintenance is also going to be impacted. We are no longer going to as frequently aerate and split seed or fertilize these playing fields. We will reduce the frequency of that. However, right now, the kind of a benefit of shelter in place is all the playing fields right now are probably in the best shape that they have ever been, being that they haven't been played on. So that's a good start. And that perhaps will allow us to reduce the maintenance of the playing fields as well. An area that we felt that was important and we did not reduce and we kept whole is playground maintenance. So we will still maintain and clean our playgrounds Monday through Friday. That there's no change in playground maintenance. Unfortunately, right now, however, our playgrounds are not open, but eventually they will be, and they will be maintained on a regular basis. We did have a reduction to contracted ranger service, which supplements our ranger staff as well. We contract through California Land Management, and they provide weekend support, and they also provide evening support in our open space areas and our urban parks. Unfortunately, that contract had to have a very drastic reduction. The contract is going from $143,000 down to $30,000 in services. So I think if you imagine the level of reduction in services, that's going to have a very big impact the service that we can provide. That service also does include litter removal in the nature preserves. That is going to now fall onto our ranger staff instead. We don't know exactly how and fully all of these changes will play out. We're still addressing the changes and how we can mitigate the changes as much as possible. Unfortunately, this is all we understand. That's part of the COVID fiscal impact and fiscal recovery that not only is the open space area going through, but also we're going to have that impact in community service and throughout the city. In recreation and the arts, we have a number of reductions programs. We have reductions to our children's theater programming. We have reductions in particular to the number of main show stage productions that they offer. And there's also reductions to their outreach program as well. The outreach program are some partnerships with the school district. In our arts, similarly, we have reductions to our programs for both adult and youth. And then we also have some reductions throughout our teen programs. Fortunately, some of the teen services have been reinstated, and we're looking forward to, with the additional reinstatement of some of the service, to making full use of our additional reinstatement plans. So, if I could ask Kristen, could you perhaps assist me here on the recreation reductions a little bit as well?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
So the recreation reductions include reducing the amount of hours that the community centers are open. So each of the 3 community centers will be closed 1 day per week. And we will in turn rotate staff through the different community services as well as the art center and our other museums to allow customer service to continue at each of the facilities. And then with respect to, like Lam said, the teen services, that was an initial cut, but fortunately, City Council saw how important our teen services and programs are. And so that was restored quite a bit. That includes the Think Fund, which was normally it's the Bryan Street Garage Fund funding, and which funds the Think Fund as well as some other leadership programs. So most of those teen programs have been restored in the budget. I think that's it for recreation.
Thank you, Kristen, there. And Chair Griffith, that concludes the budget impacts of the department. I'd be more happy to take some questions should anyone have some.
Thank you, Lam. It's a very sobering report. Councilmember Koo, would you care to comment on this at all? I know that the council's been working many hours on very difficult budget work, and it's decisions that nobody was envisioning and looking forward to being in a position to have to make. And I know there's a lot of care and that went into the process.
Well, firstly, I want to say Kristen and her team did a fabulous job in, rerouting and reconsidering a lot of the programs that, we know in our community, community services is one of the most valued areas. So she did a great job trying to coordinate all of that. It's not easy. Given what we have, I think we clawed back as much as possible for the teens. A lot of them are important programs which really help them grow. One of the areas was children's theater that a lot of the youth came in and talked about how important it was in developing themselves, their self-confidence, and making friends that are pretty much lifelong. They come back and they give back after they go back to college and when they have a chance. But it's not just in the acting side, it's also behind the scenes, behind the stage, doing stage management, doing sound, doing lights. So there's a lot that goes on there, including making costumes, which I didn't know. So it's very beneficial. We're really trying to, through this COVID crisis, we've also come to learn how important outdoor spaces, parks, etc., is for the residents in order to get some reprieve from being indoors, just to go out and be, see some life instead of just at home. So that's another area that I think, was very, very treasured. So again, based on all these kinds of knowledge that we've gained through this, we've really worked to try to save as much as possible here. Besides that, I think Lam and Kristen did a great job giving a summary, and thank you.
Thank you. I see, Keith, your hand is up. You have a question?
Yeah, I have some follow-ups for Lam. So when we talk about this maintenance that we're skipping right now, is this purely aesthetics, or is there anything that it'll hurt the plants long-term if we don't, if we don't do this for a long period of time?
I think we don't intend to have long-term hurt. What we're focusing on right now is all the safety maintenance is still in place. So this has to do with whether it be pathway maintenance or whether it has to do with playground maintenance and playground safety, excuse me, is a better term, and path safety. That's all in place. In regards to whether or not plants may die, no, we'll still maintain them, but what will happen are the seasonal and annual plants that get replanted, that may not occur. And it may not occur, the replanting may not occur until our budget has been increased, going back to perhaps our current existing levels or somewhere in between. That'll allow us to replant, but the existing plants should stay alive unless it's an annual.
Okay, especially tree maintenance. There's nothing that we're skipping for trees that may make them less durable.
Tree irrigation will remain the same. Tree trimming will remain the same. That's part of the city's urban forestry, and I have not heard that they have made any drastic reductions to their tree maintenance. Our maintenance of trees is limited to limbing of the lower limbs. We don't maintain the upper limbs.
Okay, and how about the work that the fire department and other parts of the city do for the foothills fire mitigation?
The fire mitigation plan is not impacted by the budget reductions.
Okay, so that continues.
Yes.
Now, how well has the public been obeying things like playground closures and things like that?
Unfortunately, we've had, I think, both residents or visitors that have observed our closure and or caution signs. And we've also experienced the opposite. We've had caution tape that's been torn down and removed. We've had signage that has been ripped off. We've had courts that were closed and locked be unlocked and played upon. What we've done is upon being reported, we've gone back out and we've relocked, or we've re-caution taped off or closed or re-signed.
How about things like the Acre Foothills Park? Have they been affected by this?
Can you repeat that, please?
Actera does the plantings up in Foothills Park. Are they, during the closures, have they been able to access their plants and maintain their plants?
I do not know that. I'd have to look into that and get back to you.
So
Okay.
that's the Grassroots Ecology Nursery, and I believe they have maintained regular access. I've observed access there.
Yeah, whenever I've been up there, they've been up there working.
And I think there's no reason why they would have been kept out.
And do you happen to know if Friends of Foothills Park is continuing doing their species, their native invasive species removal?
I do not know, but I will find out, and I'll send a message back to the commission.
But I assume if Grassroots had access, then the Friends of Palo Alto's parks would also have access.
I'm not aware of us restricting access to our partner groups.
Okay.
I actually thought that they were incorporated into grassroots ecology, and that they were doing all of the volunteer work parties for both kinds of activities.
Of course, volunteer work parties have taken a hit the past few months.
Okay, thank you.
If there aren't any further questions, Chair Greenfield, I also have another portion of the COVID-19 financial impact, and that's the CIPs.
Wait, before you go to CIPs,
Yes, Dave.
I had one other question, and that was, I am absolutely amazed at with the huge fiscal impact that you've been able to get such, only have to have these sets of impacts. That truly is an amazing juggling act. The only one I'm really concerned about, of course, is the big reduction in contract rangers, and that's a huge drop from 150 to 30K. And I hope that other members of staff will be able to fill in, or that we may have to reduce the hours of the open space or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Two-part response. In regards to the hours of open space, despite the reduction in the contract ranger service, we are looking at a different operating model where we will not have to reduce the hours of open space. It will be, we're looking at a model of leaving and keeping the open space areas open. However, perhaps there may not be staffing available. And however, the goal of this model is to retain the operating hours and open hours. In regards to your other question, in regards to us being able to come up with a budget that has what would be relatively a minimal amount of budget reductions, I think that is in thanks to not only our all of our recreation, all of our arts, and all of our open space and parks managers, and through Kristen's leadership, but it's also through council support of our program. To meet the reductions, we actually had to propose much drastic and much more reductions. However, through the series of budget hearings, council was able to reinstate some of our programs. So I think it's been a collaborative effort from both staff and the council and our general community members as a whole, speaking and informing of what's important to them.
Chair, I have one question for Lamb.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Lamb, in terms of summer camps, what's been the fiscal impact in having to cut so many programs, and what's been our communication, and what do we anticipate for signups with this new offering that we're trying to do this summer with camps?
That's a difficult question to answer this time. We're still going through the registration process. We only recently, because the county just this Monday announced changes to what we can and cannot offer for summer camps. We had to sort of pivot and make a quick change to our offerings. And so registration has only really just begun, and we don't have the numbers at this time. I fret to even guesstimate at this point. So we're too early in the process.
I don't know what the communication has been, but I would urge a robust communication to parents. I think there could be some strong interest for camps this summer. My second question is in terms of middle school sports. If we do indeed have middle school sports this year, are there any cuts anticipated for the middle school athletic programs?
There are no cuts for the middle school athletics programs. However, there is an increase in the fee to participate. So in order for the department to meet our budget reduction goals, it was a combination of some program areas having reductions and some program areas having fee increases to generate revenue.
Thank you.
Councilmember Koo, now that I'm off mute.
Thank you. I just wanted to also ask, with the litter removal from the parks, would it be possible to have signs to ask people who come and to take home their trash with them, just so that we can help with some reduction in trash in the receptacles? Is that something to think about?
Certainly, we can think about that. We have several ways to address this. One of the areas that's currently already being addressed is in some of our parks, for example, Ricanata Park. We have actually removed all the trash cans already. Part of the city's waste reduction program is to implement where we can a dumpster program instead of a trash can program. So Ricanata Park right now, we're asking participants to gather their litter and bring to a central dumpster. It's not implemented everywhere. We may not be able to implement it everywhere. So definitely the suggestion that you have given us, will take that into account.
Thank you, Lam. I also wanted to ask about the Think Fund. So it's been reinstated. The Think Fund is usually a grant application, right? So I understand that Magical Bridge had 3 grants that they had submitted for COVID purposes in helping live moves and so forth. Can you give me a little bit idea about where is this Think Fund going now? Because I understand their three grants were declined or rejected. If I can get a little bit understanding about the Think Fund.
I'm not as familiar with it, and perhaps maybe Kristen maybe as well, but if not, we definitely can look into that and get back to council member.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Koo, I can talk about that. So the Think Fund is still going to be a program. It's still going forward, and it will still be the same model of teens submitting a proposal to do a project. And then the project is typically something that benefits teens or is for teens. I can get back to you on those particular grants applications that were not approved. But usually these grants are specific projects that get submitted, and then the staff work with the teens to refine them and get it to a point where it can be something that's implemented.
Okay,
so
great.
That same model is still going forward.
Okay, thank you for reassuring me. One last thing is, at some of the parks, is it, I was reading one of the emails from the community in a neighborhood that said their park is looking a little bit sad. And so is there any way that we might be able to organize volunteers or neighborhood volunteers to help out with their neighborhood park? And I don't know I know we don't have staff to oversee this, but would the commissioners be willing to kind of shepherd this program if it's something that you would consider?
Absolutely. I think this is the type of collaborative work that the commission can be helpful with direction from staff and engaging the community to help support our community. And I think these are really important efforts that we can be helpful with, again, with staff's direction and support.
Yeah, and if it would be
So I'm waiting to hear from staff.
yeah, guidance through staff.
I think that's something that we could certainly look at. We'd want to make sure that whatever program we were endorsing met the county's health order. And I think, we've really had to modify our parks maintenance model just to ensure that two park staff aren't riding in the same truck together, that they're able to maintain social distancing. So I think once we're able to get to some level of normal, we can do a lot of catch up in those parks, but it's really been limited as to what we can do. And Lom can probably provide more information on that, but we've had to adjust and adapt as the shelter in place was first implemented, and then as it loosens a little bit.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, just considering it, it would be, I think you'll bring out a lot of people to help out at the parks, but just a suggestion here. Thank you.
That's something that's in our Parks Master Plan as well, to do more sort of community ownership of parks and get them out to do the maintenance and cleanup. So that would align with that well.
Very good, thank you.
And I appreciate the question. It's really what a primary focus of this meeting, I think, is to understand how the Parks and Rec Commission can help with new issues that are up, including engaging the community's support to help address these.
Yeah, I know in our neighborhood park, Cubberley Field, it's not going to be possible for us to mow the lawn, but certainly my mother used to walk the Santa Monica beach picking up trash once a week from the beach, and I can certainly bring a glove and pick up trash. If she could do that for 30 years, I can do it. And then also the other thing that maintenance does is they blow the leaves off of the track, the new track, which I don't necessarily think is necessary very often, as often as they do it. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks. I have a couple quick questions. First off, regarding the Bailon's contractor reductions, were we able to maintain the Bailon's gate closure in the evening through contract services? I know that was a real important one.
Chair, we are still working out the logistics of that. We've approached our contractors, both our park maintenance contractor and also our contracted ranger service, and we haven't finalized all of our service level changes and or implementation process, but we do want to be able to have at minimum park closure. We don't know for sure. We just don't know how the model is going to work out yet. We know if we were to have reduced hours, then we could get park closure and gates locked. But if we were to make every effort to ensure that we have full regular hours all the way until the end of sunset, we don't know how that's going to look yet.
And Lom, excuse me, for the benefit of the commission, could you explain what the issue is here?
Yes, our open space preserves are open essentially from sunrise all the way till 30 minutes past sunset. We operate our regular park rangers. We only have 7 total, 7 days a week, managing 4 open space preserves. And so as you can imagine, summer times where we're looking at 14-hour days, we could not stretch the 7 rangers to manage both open and closed parks every day. So as a result, we rely on contract ranger service to assist us in the evenings. And this is where they come in during the evening hours, and those are there. They're there for both patrol, they're there for litter removal, and they also provide the service of where the preserves that have gates, where they would lock the gates for us. And so now we're asking them to reduce their compensation from, as mentioned earlier, 143,000 down to 30,000. And we're working with them to ask them what type of services they can provide us for that minimal amount.
Thank you. It sounds like a challenge for sure. Also, regarding the community centers being closed 1 day per week, will this be a rotating day through the week so that only one community center would be closed on a given day? Or is it Fridays, or what's the thinking on that?
We haven't worked out the details yet, but I think the initial thought was to do what you said, to rotate the closure dates. So there's always 2 community centers open on a given day.
Great. That sounds like a better solution, or a better form of reduction for the community. I do appreciate all of the reductions are difficult, and I know there've been a lot in the rec programs, and I wonder how much of those reductions are programs that would be difficult to pull off given the shelter-in-place guidelines, things like the Children's Theater or the art programs at the Art Center for both adults and youth and teens. Was that a part of the prioritization in deciding where to make cuts?
It was a factor in the decision-making, and like you said, none of our reductions were easy. It was really difficult, and just hearing especially teens talk from all our different programs that we provide and the benefit that they provide to mental health, emotional well-being in the community. It was extremely hard and difficult. But when we had to make those tough decisions, looking at the theater performances and knowing that it's going to likely be a while until a theater is full of attendees again, definitely played somewhat of a role in how we prioritize those.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions before we move on from anyone?
Chair?
Yes, please.
Would you like some statistics from the county health? I just thought I'd share. So Santa Clara County Public Health they did a survey to understand where most of the people here are, what their willingness are like. So it says 59% of residents are paying attention to the COVID needs and the news, which is large because usually not that many people keep up to speed on what county is pushing out in terms of their news and so forth. And they said 73% of residents' biggest fear is the second wave of this coming back again of COVID. 59% of the people in Santa Clara County finds public health is very important. And 71% of the people in Santa Clara County says that the way that they went forward with the shelter in place is heading in the right direction. Also, county is public health is also pushing out their mobile testing. So last week they were in Mountain View, and they're looking at ways to come more here to the North County. And they're also expanding the testing for employers who are also requiring their employees to be tested. So that's all I have from county about COVID.
Thank you. That's appreciated. Helps color the picture a little bit more. Okay, the next item on the agenda is, I want to thank staff very much for the presentation.
Are we going to talk about CIP?
Yeah, yep, thanks, my bad. Let's go to CIP, please, Lon.
Yes, thank you. The fiscal recovery for due to the impacts of COVID-19 extend beyond our operating budget. The reductions also extend into our capital improvement project budget. And that is not just within Community Service Department, but it is citywide. In particular, for us in Community Service, we were asked to reassess our projects, both timelines, necessity, and also perhaps reduce scope of projects. And this is all along the lines of addressing the $39 million budget shortfall that's projected. So within our Community Service Department, as you're aware, most of the capital improvement projects are within parks and open space. So as a result, we needed to reassess. Some of the projects that we had to defund and cancel, some projects we had to suspend, and some projects we had to defer. And then the fourth category of projects is we had to reduce scope on some projects. In particular, a project that we have had to cancel is the turf management plan. This was a project to develop best practices for turf management to address the needs of sustaining healthy turf for athletic play. As you're aware, there's a heavy emphasis and a high need for athletic play throughout the year. Of course, turf cannot handle that. And so we were looking at developing a turf management plan. We have had to cancel that, and we'll address that through implementing downtime in our turf to keep up the health. And then we'll continue our current practices of occasional split seeding, occasional aerating, and occasional, and sometimes entire turf renovations. And we'll look at doing those in-house instead now. Another project that we've had to suspend is the 10.5 acre expansion to the Bailon Athletic Center. This being also another plan and not necessarily a development project. It was difficult to justify against all the other reductions of maintenance needs, program needs, and service level cuts. And so we had to suspend this one. This particular project we hope to bring back when the city is in better financial standing. Another area where we had to make changes is we've had to push out some projects beyond fiscal year 22 and look and see if we could push them out to fiscal years 23, 24, 25, or perhaps even further out. So we did do that. We pushed out several projects, for example, Johnson Park, Ramos Park as well, Weary Park. We pushed out those dates based on an assessment and talking to staff. How long can the amenities in those parks still be made, be sustained?
Excuse me, Lon, that was Johnson, Ramos, and what was the third park?
Weary.
Weary, thank you.
And in speaking with our staff who maintain those these parks these CIPs that we're pushing out, we opted to instead invest in some repair dollars to maintain the parks, to keep them open, so that we could push out their renovation dates. And we think that with some funding for repairs, we can achieve keeping those parks open. There were some projects that we felt we could not wait on and that we're still going to proceed with. I think of interest are the ones on the horizon. Cameron Park improvements is going to continue, and that's scheduled for fiscal year 21 coming up. Ramos Park improvement project is going to continue as well. Ricanata Parks improvement project will continue as well. That's a multi-phase project. And so that's actually not just for fiscal year 21, but it's beyond fiscal year 21. We are going to continue with Bowwell Park improvement project, and that one is still set through a funding mechanism to allow us to continue to do the design of fiscal year 21 and perhaps do construction fiscal year 22. There has been interest in this project combining with the Birch Street project as well. And so in parallel and perhaps later down the line in conjunction, those projects will continue. Other projects that did not get impacted, the JMZ project is still set to continue without changes in funding. It's actually almost complete, I think, as well as you're aware. And so towards the end of summer, we think it should be complete. And, but it doesn't necessarily open our way. There's a large logistic process. There's also quarantining our animals, also to reintroduce them as well. So that'll take some time. Other big projects that are continuing is the Highway 101 pedestrian bike bridge project. That one is continuing as well. It was suspended temporarily due to the shelter-in-place order. However, as the county eased up its restrictions on public works construction projects, we resumed that project. So I think what I've covered projects that were pushed out, projects that were eliminated, projects that remained. And then we also had some projects that had to be reduced. These projects varied in size and scope. The largest project that had to be reduced is our Bixby Park completion project. That project had a $300,000 reduction in the scope. However, the project still remains at about $2.8 million in funding. And so we think despite the reduction in the scope, that the project will not have much of a significant impact based on the reduction, and we'll continue to proceed with that.
What park was that again?
Bixby completion, Bixby Park.
Bixby.
This project is a focus on the habitat improvements, irrigation, seating signage, and improvements to the parking lot. But the majority of the funding is intended for habitat improvements.
And one more question. I seem to hear that Ramos was both in the defer list and in the list that was not touched, that was on.
I apologize if I misspoke. Robles is the one that is pushed out. Ramos continues.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've also had reductions in some of our ongoing CIPs. We've had a reduction in our CIPs for athletic court maintenance. We've had a reduction in our CIP for emergency repairs. And we've had a reduction in our trail maintenance CIP as well. So all in all, packaged together, the various types of either reduction or deferment or project elimination was part of the reassessment of our CIPs. In general, I think though that as much as we did not want to do this, I mean, it was necessary. Some of the projects, the two projects that we had to eliminate, we'd rather not. However, it just, as a result of the circumstances, all of this needed to be packaged together. And sort of concludes the changes to our CIPs.
Thank you for the overview, again, sobering news, but work that had to be done. Questions or comments from commissioners?
I have a quick question for Lam.
Please.
Yes. Can you provide just a brief visibility on the decision to go ahead with the pedestrian bridge after the suspension? Was it because of how the contract is written, or just curious how that worked, in that it seems the money saved from that could go to a lot of different programs. And I'm just wondering a little more information and transparency on that.
Okay, so for verification, you were asking about the Highway 101 bike pedestrian bridge project? Okay, so the suspension of the project and the resumption of the project was based on county health order. The county health order has gone through multiple iterations, initially restricting construction and public works projects. And so as a result, the city suspended that project. A few weeks later, the county order changed and allowed public works projects to resume. And later on, the public health order allowed construction projects to resume as well. And so the city resumed it. As for any consideration in regards to using the funding for that project elsewhere, I'm probably not well versed in it to really explain how and why that project remained. I could get more information for you and respond if you'd like.
Kristen or Lydia, would you like to comment on that?
The city manager said that, and also Public Works, Brad Eagleson basically said that it was ready to go. So design work was done. Everything was in place for the construction to start. So after the county order was released, they started to resume work on it because it was shovel ready.
And if I recall correctly from the council meetings and some of the dialogue going back and forth, there was an issue of financial penalties would be incurred from the contractor. Since contract was already in place, it didn't really make sense, fiscal sense to put a hold on that due to the penalties.
Not only that, but they had said that most of the city money had already been spent on planning, and that we got the grant from the Santa Clara County just about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, and we're spending other people's money now, Google and Santa Clara County, and very little from the city. That's what I heard. Is that what you heard, Lydia?
You're correct. There's a large majority of the funding that does come from VTA and other sources. I'm not quite sure if the city's money is spent already or not, but obviously we don't want to lose any of the money that is coming from other sources, and it's shovel ready too. So yes, thank you for the addition.
Yep. And thanks for the question, Jeff. That brings up a good point. It's worth clarifying. Anyone else?
Yes.
Anna, I see your hands up.
Thank you. Would it be possible, Lam, to see a really simple list of the projects that you ran through? I was writing down really furiously, but I don't think I got them all. And I think it would be really helpful for us to see what's stopped, what's been pushed off, what's been delayed, what you're going to proceed on, just sort of a summary in writing, if that's an easy thing to do. And it certainly doesn't have to be tomorrow morning, just sometime in the future, so that we could know kind of what the costs are as we proceed with some of the ad hoc committees and gathering other information. Is that possible?
Absolutely possible. Yes, we will do that.
Thank you so much.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? Keith.
Just to echo what Jeff was saying, some of these like Cameron Park and Ramos Park doesn't seem to be a high priority to me. I'm not quite sure why we're going forward with that and not saving that money for other things that have more immediate impact on the community.
Part of those two projects have to do with the design is already in place. They've started the initial public outreach, and they are small dollar projects, small value projects, excuse me. The Cameron Park, relative to all other RCIPs, the renovation is mostly just playground and play structures. That one in particular, we felt could not wait. That one has, it's a wood structure playground, and it has termite damage. So if we were not to proceed with it, we would, in the near future, need to reassess and consider closing the playground. And so that factoring that in and factoring that it's a small dollar value project, we opted to proceed with that and recommended that it be proceeded. In regards to the Ramos Park project, that project is another small value project. And it's just that the design is ready as well, and the public outreach has already occurred. Technically, that one's condition is a little bit better than the Cameron Park one, and that one possibly could continue as it is if we really needed to reconsider swapping out with a different project. However, the value of that project is difficult to swap out with another project because most of our other projects are larger in size.
And what about Bullware?
Bullware, the bulk of the funding for Bullware are development impact fees, and not necessarily the city's general fund. And so the proceeding with that project does not impact the city's bottom line, because it's in essence it's almost like a third party dedicated fund that that's in place of what they're already. And it by
that money can't be moved over to recreation programs or anything like that?
The money is restricted in how we can use it. The money there is restricted by several factors. The money has to be spent within a certain proximity of where the development occurred that paid for the fees. And it also, the funding is also restricted in that it needs to be used in a capacity in a way that increases capacity and usage. It cannot be used for maintenance. It cannot be used for renovation. It may not be used for replacement, unless it's a replacement that increases capacity. So with the various restrictions of these development impact fees, we're not able to apply it to our other projects. Most of our CIP projects in community services have to do with replacement and renovation of our park amenities. And so that is not eligible for use of the development impact fees.
Okay, thank you.
I see a couple hands up. Are these just hands that haven't been put down? Ann, did you have something else you wanted to say?
No, I put my hand back up, and
Please.
I just wanted to comment on the 10.5 out at the Bailons. I'm really sorry that we can't continue to look at that like now, because I thought we had good community input and engagement, and I'm worried that we're going to lose that if we push it out too far. So just a comment. Thank you. Thank you.
And I have just one quick comment on the turf management budget going away. As much as that's a project that's close to my heart, I think it makes sense in that the money was allocated to do a study to really research and gain information on how to properly maintain the park fields, the playing fields, but there was no money to follow up with the actual work required to do the field maintenance, which was going to be on the order potentially of $500,000 to $1 million per field. So that's all I'm adding. Any other comments before we move along? Thank you. Okay, so now
Jeff, are you on mute?
yes, I am, because I put my space bar.
Now you're back.
There we go. Thank you. Again, thank you to staff for all of the diligent and detailed work. I know this has been a time-consuming effort and a difficult effort on a number of different levels, not to mention the shelter-in-place restrictions that have impacted your daily work lives. So thank you very much for your dedication to our community. Now we will move on to discussing the priorities for the Park and Recs Commission, which we established in our retreat in January. And really, this is an exercise to see if how these still apply. So Catherine, could you put the priorities on the screen for us to view? Review, please. Thank you. And those are a little small to see, but I'll just read through the priorities that we ended up with. And they were rather generic priorities, as we discussed in our meeting, in our retreat, with the idea they would be fairly encompassing. And that may be doing us a favor now as we look to reconsider the priorities and see how they're still applicable. So the priorities are environmental and fiscal sustainability, preserve and enhance parks and open spaces, and expand recreational opportunities. And
I'm no longer looking at the, I'm looking at something that has nothing to do with what you're talking about.
yep, I can see that. Catherine, would you like me to share my screen? I've got something up about if I just try to share my screen. Nope, I can't do that while someone else is sharing.
Sorry, I was unmuted. I don't know why it did that.
No problem, let's see. Okay. Okay, so are you seeing my screen now?
Yeah, you
Okay.
can even make it bigger if you want with Control+.
Yep.
It's okay.
I'm just trying to get to the Word window as opposed to the. There we go. All right, and so if you recall, when we were in our retreat, we ended up putting together some check boxes for which projects each of these.
What did you just do? Can you move it up into the middle again? There. Don't touch it.
No, I'm trying to move that window so I can see my other windows. I don't know. Display. Hang on. All right. Moving right along. Okay. So we can do one of two things. We can discuss these priorities and decide if we want to adjust these or not, or we can and if we do decide we're going to adjust these priorities, this item is an action, so we can choose to. If we make a change, we'll need a motion and then a vote to officially change these, or if we decide to leave them on alone as they are, then there will be no action required, which kind of makes intuitive sense. And Ann and I have had a number of discussions with Darren about our commission priorities that were set earlier this year, and discussions on the specific ad hoc groups and liaison assignments that we have right now. Given the considerable shifts in the landscape that have occurred, it seems appropriate to review these and consider changes. And kind of the overall discussion was take a look at the ad hocs and the liaison roles we have and consider which of these should remain active, which of these we might want to put on hold. And as we discuss things further, rather than on hold, we thought maybe on call was a better way of phrasing it, in that the discussions would be, or the groups would be available to serve staff on an as needed basis. And that's really what was thought of by on call. And then there may be an ad hoc or liaison role that we need to delete at this point. So we can do one or two things. We can either decide on the priorities without covering the ad hoc and liaison roles in detail, or we can jump to the ad hocs and liaison roles, talk about them, decide how they inform our decision on the priorities, and then go and make an action or not on the priorities, and then make an action or not on the ad hocs and liaison roles. I'm open to your thoughts on this. Personally, I think the priorities fit pretty well in an umbrella encompassing the redirection we're going to have, in that we're still focusing absolutely on fiscal sustainability and including environmental sustainability along with that, in conjunction with the council priority makes sense. We're looking to, as far as open spaces and parks go, we're looking to preserve what we have. We're looking to support them, and both through efforts with staff and potentially with the engagement with the community. And on recreation opportunities, it's kind of similar. There may be less emphasis on expanding recreation opportunities, although that's certainly within our view, but we're looking to maintain and continue to support rec opportunities. Would anybody like to comment on that?
Well, I would love to comment on that for just a minute. I was pleasantly surprised when we look back at these, Jeff, a couple of weeks ago, at how well we all did in February or whenever it was that we had our meeting to discuss this. I think that this gives us a lot of flexibility, but I also think it outlines what we were about back then. The one thing that I would, and there's some words here that I'm really glad we have right now, given the current situation and the difficulties, the challenges, and all just the sadness and the broken hearts in our country right now. I would love to see the word equity be really reinforced, and also the words that Jeff used at the beginning, the words access and opportunity and inclusion. And feels like, for me, if we could look at our commission and look at the words that we have here and see how we could include that kind of attention to the things that we do in the future, that it would be, from my perspective, a real benefit for certainly me, but for our community and for certainly our region.
I think that's a great suggestion, and I support that. Comments from others?
I can say that Foothills, because of the tremendous demand that's been shown over this past month or two, that we have to maintain our focus on that and Arastradero Preserve, just to, as you said, preserve what we have and environmental sustainability. So I don't think we can not focus on that, as opposed to, say, the 10.5 acres, which we don't have yet. So that would be my comment.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, kind of echo that, is that a lot of the stuff, I mean, our highest priority right now should be looking at how COVID is going to change the parks, and what, between opening things and having a prompt schedule of opening while keeping safety in mind. I mean, that's a full-time job right there. And so some of these other things, I look down and say that these are second and third priorities.
Thanks. Others, I can't see the hands right now in this share screen mode. Anybody else?
Brian has his hand up.
I'm sorry?
Ryan has his hand up.
Please.
Yeah, hey, Jeff, you can click on participants in the lower bottom there, and you'll get the participants back.
Yeah.
Middle bottom.
I don't have a bottom right now.
Oh,
I've got, anyway,
I can call out for you, Jeff.
or Catherine, if you can take over the display, that would be great.
Okay, you want me to, you mean you end up sharing?
Yes. So
Okay.
I'll stop share. And now my participants are back. But Ryan, please speak. You're on mute, Ryan, sorry.
Forgive me again. I'm befuddled by this this 2-device muting process. So I was just going to echo the comment that Ann made, and that Jeff, you also echoed, which I think would be great if we add a bullet. So after expand recreation opportunities, that reflects sort of the moment that we're living through right now. And I think that Ann phrased it really well.
And Anne, you want to repeat, it was something about equity, access, and inclusion.
Those were the 3 words, equity, access, and inclusion.
And I would only add.
I'm unmuting, sorry.
I would only add a verb at the beginning, which is promote equity, access, and inclusion.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so we have promote equity, access, and inclusion. And Catherine, can you add that onto the document display that you have?
Where do you want me to put that? Under recreation opportunities?
Under expand recreation opportunities, just a 4th bullet, please.
I mean, a 5th bullet. Am I changing expanding?
No, so under expand recreation opportunities, up above on the top, above the table.
Oh, here, sorry. I was in the table. Okay. So promote first.
Promote equity, access, and inclusion.
Hold on one second. Keyboard is all messed up. Promote
Okay.
equity. Go on.
Access, equity, comma, access, comma, and inclusion. And that was going to be the 4th line. So you can hit return and put expand down.
Hit.
So,
like
so
that?
yes, and maybe hit Alt Tab or Shift Alt Tab. I think it changes the position of those lines. Let's see. Anyway, we want the promote line to be the fourth line,
Oh, okay.
and then have equity, access, and inclusion capitalized, please.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have more comments as we're considering this?
One more comment, and that is because Cubberley Master Plan is so in flux, I would like there to remain significant focus on that to support staff during this very difficult juggling act that they're going through, at least for the next couple months.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's still, given that these priorities are fairly general and not specific, I think that's, for me, it's covered under expand recreational opportunities and preserve and enhance parks.
Okay.
And even under sustainability and under fiscal sustainability. Open to others' comments on that. Anne?
Yeah, I don't think any of us will forget about Cubberley, David, in the very near future at all. And I know we have so many commissioners who are so interested in it that I think this is okay standing the way it is.
Yep. Jeff Lemare, do you have any comments?
I do not. I agree with what's been said, and especially adding that fourth point.
Okay, so for simplicity, I think we're probably at the point where a motion would be appropriate.
I move to adopt our 2020 priorities.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. And do we have a, and so this is a motion to adopt the change to our priorities by adding the fourth priority.
Second.
And we have a second from Vice Chair Cribbs. Does anybody care to comment? Okay, if no one would like, I lost my. So I see no hands up. So let's go ahead and proceed with a vote on this, starting with Commissioner Cribbs, Vice Chair
Yes.
Cribbs.
Yes.
And I am a yes. And Commissioner Macaulay.
Yes.
Commissioner Lemare.
Yes.
And sorry, I don't have an alphabetical list in front of me. Commissioner Moss.
Yes.
And Commissioner Rectal.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes 6-0. We have amended our 2020 priorities. So now we'll move on to the next item, which is the review of our ad hoc and liaison roles. Catherine, can
Okay,
you?
hold on. Let me just get rid of the other one.
Yep, thank you. So again, Ann and I had discussions with Darren on this, and it was interesting to review these in that many of these roles seem more important than ever, but I think it would be useful to go through the ad hocs individually, to talk about them and talk about how they may be a new focus may be appropriate, and interested in any feedback. So this can really be more of an active discussion. If you have comments as we're going through each of the ad hocs, please feel to raise your hand or chime in. So first on the list is the Bailon 10.5 acre.
I have a quick question about the general thing, and that is that I'm noticing that the list of ad hoc committees doesn't necessarily match the list of projects that we just approved. And the one that's out of sync is park safety and sustainability, as opposed to park and facility use policy. All the others are sort of in lockstep. Was that on purpose?
I'm sorry, park safety and
sustainability projects are not represented by a single ad hoc committee. Everything else is represented by a single ad hoc committee.
all right, well, let's consider that as we go through this list.
Yeah.
Okay, so first is Bailon 10.5 acres development, and we just heard from staff that this is that that the budget is being put on hold for this, if I understand correctly. Long, could you clarify that again for us, please? Lom, you're on mute, sorry.
I apologize. The project has been suspended, and along those same lines, the project has also been defunded. The staff does have a desire to bring this project back when the city's financial status is in better standing. In addition to that, Commissioner Macaulay has reached out and expressed finding alternative ways to see if we could still keep traction on this project. And I think Commissioner Cribbs expressed that desire as well.
And I know that there has been some community engagement on this. So in order to minimize the burden on staff on this, it seems like maybe it would be appropriate to have this ad hoc move from active to on call. And I also think it's worth taking a step back on our ad hocs and setting expectations. When we started off ambitiously in January, we were hoping, generally speaking, for action from each ad hoc on a monthly basis or every other month, depending on what's going on. And I think we need to scale back our expectations on actions now, and that staff really is taxed very heavily with just getting by right now, and the evolving it's like they're working on a plate at a restaurant that keeps getting filled up and never gets emptied. The platter keeps getting more put on it. So we need to be sensitive on that, and so as we talk about ad hocs being active or on call, active is something I think a status that'll be generally moving forward. On call might be in a holding pattern, depending on staff. Now it sounds like the commissioners may be interested in meeting offline a bit, independently of staff, to try and keep this active. So I'm interested in feedback whether active or on call makes more sense for this one.
My opinion is that we should reach out to the community. One of the things that is attractive to this is there was at least potential for community funding.
That's right.
If that's gone away, then I think we put it on call, because then it'll be a while before the city can finance it entirely itself.
So what I'm kind of hearing from that is temporarily active would be appropriate, but revisited in the short term and may move to on call. Is that accurate?
I think you mentioned that if they can do it without staff help, if they can do some things offline without staff help for a while, that would be the best way to preserve staff time.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I don't know. This
Sure.
is Brian. I don't know if it matters how we distinguish it exactly. I think the bottom line is it's going to have maybe one meeting. I imagine that it makes sense for Lom to join us for that one teleconference. Obviously, he's the person most in the know and most connected to all of these things, to kind of bring us up to speed, and then we'll figure out if there really is anything else for us to do for the rest of the year.
I would concur, Chair Greenfield, with Commissioner Macaulay. Staff is not opposed to continuing participation in this project, even though it's been defunded. In particular, if the focus is seeing alternative ways to perhaps continue outreach or continue finding sources of funding, we're open to being a part of that as well.
Okay. Thank you. I think we kind of have a consensus. We'll keep this active for the time being.
So Jeff, I'm a little confused because I thought I was on that ad hoc committee, but maybe I was dismissed.
Maybe I'm thinking you must have been on it last year.
And then I changed. Okay, thanks. No worries.
What we're looking at is what came from our the minutes from our retreat. Okay, let's try to move on then. Cubberley master plan seems very appropriate to keep active right now, and I have reached out to Kristen already, and made clear that we're very interested in helping with the transition process in whatever manner is helpful to staff. So I think this one makes sense to keep on the list.
So is this more Cubberley operations as opposed to the master plan itself?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Are we putting the master plan on hold and dealing just with the day-to-day?
I guess that's a question for Kristen. Do you expect any activity on the master plan this year? Or would we be better just renaming this the Cubberley Ad Hoc Committee, or should we try to be more specific? Kristen?
My recommendation would be to have this be more general related to Cubberley so that it covers both. I will say that the one piece of the master plan that still needs to come to the commission and council is the CEQA document. There's a variety of reasons why that's been so delayed. One is related to a change in CEQA law related to how traffic impacts are assessed. So we have to go back and do some additional traffic studies that will not happen till the next fiscal year. So that's still coming. But again, I think, like you said, anything related to Cubberley is very relevant right now. So I would just make it a more general ad hoc.
Okay, so let's just call the ad hoc Cubberley and get rid of master plan. That'll be part of our proposed motion. The next one is projects and fund development, which seem like which covers CIPs, projects, and funding, outreach. It seemed like a fun, silly name at the time. I'm having second and third thoughts on that one. Definitely, I think this is an appropriate ad hoc to keep, but I'd like to see the name change so that it's something that can be referred to in a functional manner.
Could we just change the name by adding another D to fund and then a space for development?
Sure. I like that idea. Anybody else have comments?
I think it's critical because we're going to have to deal not only the fallout from this is going to go on for several years. And
Yep.
so we really need to be looking out at least 2, 3, 4 years.
Yep.
Agreed.
Okay, so projects and fund development will become part of the will be name change as part of an action. Foothills Park, the pilot project looks like it will be going to council on the agenda later this month. Is that confirmed, Kristen?
Sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. There's been discussion about the Foothills Park pilot program going to City Council later this month. Has that been confirmed on an agenda?
It's tentatively scheduled for June 22nd. It's not completely confirmed, but that's the tentative date.
Okay. And the other aspect of the Foothills Park ad hoc was the development of the 7.7 acres. I don't know to what extent that is being put on hold. I'm not sure if Lom directly addressed that.
The 7.7 acre project is not on hold. It's proceeding. There was discussion about what years it would be funded because it was a 3-year phased-in project. And I apologize, I don't have the exact details with me, but it is not being suspended and pushed out. We're still proceeding with it. If it was suspended in a way, it was only going to be pushed out 1 year because this was a small ticket item. I can verify the severity of the change, but I don't recall it being anything that was majorly impacting.
Okay, so it seems to make clear sense that we need to keep this ad hoc for now. And if council comes back and is positive on moving forward with the pilot project, then this ad hoc is going to be very busy. It sounds like as far as the 7.7 acres, that would be more of a holding pattern, waiting for staff to have specific needs to discuss this with the commission based on what's happening with the funding cycle. Does that make sense? Any comments? Anyway, I think we need to keep Foothills Park for now.
Yep, agreed.
Great. Park and facility use policy. Had discussion with Darren about this in terms of I think there's a lot of potential use right now for discussing the use of parks and how park policy may be changed or impacted by the shelter-in-place guidelines and the COVID-19 impacts, which will extend for a period of time. And I asked Darren what he thought about, and he agreed with that. And then I asked, in the name it says parks and facilities. Do you think it's appropriate to create a different ad hoc to have the same apply to open space policy? And his opinion was that it would make sense for this single park and facility use policy ad hoc to have the latitude to rethink implementing protocols across parks and open spaces. So given that, I think that makes a lot of sense to keep active. And I think that may answer the question that you raised, David, in terms of park safety and sustainability. I think this comes under the umbrella of this ad hoc. I don't know if staff or commissioners would like to comment further on that.
That's fine.
Okay, park amenities. There has been, so in general for park amenities, this has been looking at things like dog parks and restrooms. On further discussions with Darren, it seemed like it might be appropriate for this ad hoc to do, at least on occasion, do a pre-review of CIPs or park improvement plans before they came to the commission. So this ad hoc could be used just as to run preliminary presentations and any questions by an ad hoc. If there's an agreement that makes sense, it seems like it might be more appropriate to rename this the Park Improvements Ad Hoc, and then it would more directly be looking at park improvement plans as well as all of the amenities which could be considered improvements, such as dog parks and restrooms.
So are you renaming this like pre-CIP? In other words, you're doing the legwork ahead of a CIP?
No, it would be post CIP. It would be park improvement plan. So any of the park improvement plans come to the commission for approval, and so this would be a group that could work with staff as necessary on the specifics of park improvement plans, either before they go to the commission for consideration or after they go to commission for initial consideration before an approval, et cetera. Do you have any comments to add on that, Lom?
This is Ryan. I think that seems certainly fine to me. Park improvements, park amenities, it doesn't make much of a difference from my perspective. The other thing that committee has been working on for some time is dog parks and restrooms, which are obviously park improvements. So that fits.
Yep. Thank you. I tried to make note of that, and absolutely, I know that dog parks and restrooms have been the primary focus. I think expanding the focus to include the PIPs makes sense.
I apologize. I was muted earlier, but no, I'm in concurrence.
Thank you. And finally, rec opportunities seem as important as ever to be considering right now. There's the whole structure of the rec programs is hit a curve and needs some reconsideration, and hopefully the commission will be in a position to help staff in this effort. So in short, all of the ad hocs seem to have a role, at least in the near term. And there's 3 name changes that we're suggesting. So just to review, the name changes would be the second one would become Cubberley, the third one becomes project and fund development, and park amenities changes to park improvements. So thank you, Catherine. Does anyone have any comments on the ad hocs or questions about their roles in the near term before we move on to the liaison assignments? Or does anyone feel like we need to add a new ad hoc? The chair says with hesitance. Okay, then let's move on to liaison roles.
Forgive me, Jeff. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be slow. Let me just pause and ask. I don't have anything particular in mind, but in light of the new goal that we added, right, priority of promoting equity, access, and inclusion, is there anything that we'd want to do on that topic specifically, or do we think it just fits within the existing ad hoc committees?
So I don't have any specific ideas on how to further flesh that out. We can always add new ad hocs or remove or change ad hocs. And unless someone has a concise idea on how to move forward on this quickly, I suggest we stay with what we have and then consider something further at a later date.
What about if we were to keep the ad hocs as they are, and then at our next meeting, maybe we all could do some homework about thinking thoughtfully about what we're trying to achieve, and might maybe come up with some specific ways that, so that, because I saw that as being overarching, so that every ad hoc would have that charge to, oh, by the way, not by the way, but let's consider this as part of the work that we do. So perhaps if we all were thoughtful about it, we could come up with some ways to make it more than words. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and I think that's a good role for the commission to take on, which is something that we can consider without burdening staff. Anyone have any comments? Okay, so if there are further comments or ideas on that, we can discuss that in brief terms on at the end of the meeting during the ad hoc and liaison updates. Okay, I'd like to try and move through the ad hocs real quickly. So I'll just go through with kind of quick summaries of what Darren and Ann and I discussed. Aquatics certainly seems to make sense to keep active. BCCP makes sense to keep active in the short term, but as soon as the plan is formalized, then that liaison role would end. Community gardens make sense to keep active. GSI as well. I know Commissioner Moss has been continuing to attend the stormwater committee meetings.
Yeah, and they have funding. They have guaranteed funding as opposed to the city. It's taxed to each household, so they can continue to do projects for us or with us, even if we don't have funding.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Park dedication is one that the thought would be better to put on call. It's something that I always considered as a priority, but given the load on staff right now, it's something that I think we could resume comfortably when staff was in a position to consider that. So that's something that I'm recommending that we put on call, on hold, on call. Anyone care to comment on that? Okay. PAUSD City Liaison is a role that Keith is continuing to be active with, and that makes sense to continue monitoring those meetings. The safe routes is something that is, I think, can be continued with a minimal burden and makes sense, especially with the increased use of safe routes in the community these days by means of transportation other than cars. Stanford is another one that Darren recommended could go on call. It's kind of been in a holding pattern anyway. Are you okay with that, Commissioner Lemaire, or any comments?
I would agree with that. I'm good with that.
No, thank you.
I only had one question about that. Since our last meeting, well, no, I guess the master plan was defeated or rejected or whatever. Does any of that have anything to do with us? Do we have to react in any way to that, or is it basically not related?
You talking about the GUP?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we just wait. Since ball's in Stanford's courts, if they post something new, then we can evaluate it.
Does it affect our use of the dish or the paths around Stanford or anything like that?
No, I mean, I don't think it has any effect on anything.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Moving on, sustainability, I think makes sense. And I think we'll be looking to have a presentation from Christine Luong at one of our upcoming meetings on this sustainability climate action plan status, which is going to council later this month. Turf management is a role that I've managed with Darren, and really for a while I feel like the field users liaison would be a better name for that, and I think this makes sense to continue as a field users liaison. Turf management, as we've heard, is going to be taking a secondary role anyway. So I'm proposing that we rename this field users. And that's really liaising to the soccer organizations, the baseball and softball organizations, et cetera.
And is there any overlap between that and the parks and facility use policy ad hoc? Is there overlap?
Not really. This is more kind of outreach directly with these community groups as opposed to a policy type of a discussion and position consideration.
Okay.
Urban forestry is a new role that we were looking at taking on for the commission, and this is still in the discussion and clarification phase with the directors of Kristen and Community Services, and also with the Public Works Director, Brad Eggleston. And I think that there's an active role for the liaisons to play as we look to clarify what the role of the commission would be with respect to urban forestry. Kristen, do you have any comments to add on that?
No, I don't have any updates on that. I actually think there was a meeting scheduled with Public Works Director Brad Eggleston and I and Darren, and it was around March 19th, and the meeting got canceled and never got rescheduled. So when the time is right, we'll circle back with him and get clarity on that.
Yes, another casualty. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the Ventura coordinated area plan makes sense to have someone continuing to monitor that. And youth council, again, is another example of something that's more important now than ever. There was one other liaison role that we discussed that would make sense to add potentially right now, and that is a golf liaison. Given the changes at the golf course, it seemed Darren thought it would be helpful to have a commissioner involved with that. So that's a role I'd like to consider, recommend adding, and we'll be looking for someone to fill that role. So does anyone have any comments about any of the liaison roles, including potentially adding golf? Okay, does anyone have any comment or any thoughts on adding a golf liaison, or is there anybody who'd be interested in taking on that role?
I'm willing to do it, but if anyone else has a desire, they get first shot.
Okay, I don't know if Commissioner Olson is a golf enthusiast or not. She's not here, but she will be down one liaison role. Also, Jeff Lemire, I don't know if you're interested in golf with Stanford going to on-call.
I think we lost Jeff's connection.
Yeah, I'm scanning that. Okay, so why don't we hold off on adding a golf liaison until we can have some further discussion within the commission to see if there's someone interested in filling this role and confirm with Darren. Unless Lom, if you want to comment that this is something we should definitely add as an open role now and look to fill it.
We can absolutely have created a liaison. The golf course operator has welcomed city input and how we operate. So I think they would be open to it. I'm certainly open to it. And should the commission want to create this liaison, we can facilitate that.
Okay, Keith, do you want to slot into the role for the time being with the thought that you may end up getting replaced?
Yeah, put me down, and if someone else has a desire to do it, they can take it over. But at least if in the next month, if something comes up, you have someone to cover it.
Great, thank you. And Catherine, if you could change the just remove turf management from the field users liaison name. All right, it's 4 minutes to 10. Does anyone have any further discussion on this, or are we ready for a motion?
I move we update or approve the updated commission list. I mean, ad hoc list.
And we have a second. Thank you.
Second.
So Commissioner Rectal with the motion and Vice Chair Cribbs seconding the motion. Does anyone have any comments on the motion before we vote? Okay, let's go to a roll call vote. Vice Chair Cribbs.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Commissioner McCauley.
Yes.
Commissioner Moss. Commissioner Moss, you're on mute if you said something.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Rectal.
Yes.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lemaire looks to have dropped off. So that motion passes on a 5-0 vote. Thank you very much for working through that with me. We now have an opportunity. The next item is ad hoc committee liaison, ad hoc committee and liaison updates. We spent quite a while talking about that. Does anyone have any updates that they'd like to share?
Ventura is still going on. Nothing noteworthy from a park standpoint, but if people are interested, they should go. It's on the website. If they have questions, certainly contact me.
Thank you. Anyone else? Lydia, is there anything you'd like to add that didn't call on you the last time around? Thank you. I see you nodding. Okay, so let's move on. So our next.
Forgive me, Jeff.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Let me just note one thing. So, you and Kristen mentioned that the Foothills Park discussion is going to happen with council June 22nd. It's possible that there's even going to be discussion of it sooner, is my understanding. So just a heads up for everyone. I'm quite proud of the work that the commission did last year to sort of be ahead of the moment that we're in presently as it concerns Foothills Park. And so I'm optimistic that there's going to be some progress made on that front. I'm not sure whether or not it will be exactly what the commission recommended last year, simply because we're slightly in a different spot than we were when we made that recommendation. But nonetheless, the discussion is happening and moving forward.
Thank you, Brian. And thanks for the update on that. And I was under this understanding that might be on the 23rd, which is a Tuesday, which would be an extra meeting for council. Kristen said the 22nd. So I'm not sure if Kristen has a clarification on that, or we're just going to wait and see what happens here, since it may be earlier as well.
I don't have clarification on the exact date. I'm not sure. Councilmember Ku, do you know, is there a meeting on the 23rd for sure? A council meeting?
Let me check my calendar.
Yeah, I just got a notice that from Don that it's the 23rd. So if you could check that, that would be great.
There is a 23rd meeting. And I think that might be filled with budget, right? Because if I understood correctly, they were coming back to us with the final budget numbers, either the 22nd or the 23rd. I'm not remembering right now.
Yeah, well, we'll let you know the exact date that's coming forward, as well as the final budget adoption.
Okay, and along those lines, that was going to be our next PRC meeting, was the 23rd. So that we've canceled that, and the next one is July 22nd or something.
No, actually, we had already proactively changed our next meeting to June 30th with the notion that council may be preempting us on June 23rd with a meeting. Also, this will space out uh, an interval of 4 weeks between meetings. Between tonight's meeting, we'll meet in 4 weeks, and then we'll meet again on July 28th, 4 weeks after that. We'll move on to the tentative agenda for the June 30th meeting. Just again confirming that we will be meeting via Zoom on June 30th, and there are a few items that have been discussed with Darren for potential agenda, but those include the sustainability discussion. Also, in conjunction with that, we may get a presentation on recycling, both from the Public Works Department. But I think everything's in a state of flux, and given the interest of time, I'm happy with deferring this to further discussions with Darren, unless anybody has any specific input on what they're hoping to get on an agenda the next couple months. Okay, without further discussion or interest in discussion, we'll move on to our next item, which is comments and announcements. Does anyone have anything to add? Thank you everyone for joining in with this meeting. I'm really excited to get the commission restarted. I really value the contributions that each of the commissioners bring in different areas, and look forward to working with staff and council to the benefit of our community.
If I could just echo that, Jeff, and thank the staff for working with us to help us through the first Zoom initiation, and everybody's patience and learning about being on and being off and all of that kind of thing. And then I just would say that I'm really proud to be part of this commission as we look forward to the future. And I think that we can really together to bring some very definite and positive, exciting change, given what we're finding ourselves in right now. So thank you all very much for all the work that you do, and certainly thank the staff for the work that you guys do. I'm very grateful, have a lot of gratitude that I live in Palo Alto and we have a staff like you guys. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I think gratitude is a real key word to focus on. And I see that Commissioner Lemaire is back. Jeff, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I made it back. No, I got disconnected. I'm good, and I'm appreciative of being able to still have our commission going and try to help out where we can during this time. So thank you everyone for their time, and thank you staff for everything that you do.
Thank you, and a special thank you to Catherine for her role in helping make this all happen, hanging with us, and she just reappeared for us. So thank you very much, and to Lom and Kristen and Darren and everyone else as well.
Yeah, it was like you were professionals. It's like you've done this before, so it went really smoothly. Good job.
Yeah, thumbs up to anyone who didn't try speaking on mute tonight, but we'll get there.
If I could just say, as staff goes through some of these challenges, sometimes we forget, or forget's not the right word, but it's just not on the forefront of our brains that we have commissions who are here to help us, because we're so busy just trying to get each task done. So thank you for reminding us and supporting us and lending out a helping hand to us as we sort of navigate these challenges moving forward. We do really appreciate it. Sometimes we just need someone to say, hey, we're here to help. And we do really appreciate that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're making history here. So whatever we can do to help.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. We know that the staff, really staff and council are doing the heavy lifting right now, and we're here to help in any way we can.
If I may say, it's very nice to meet you, Lam.
Thank you. And then the pleasure is mine. Thank you.
All right, I didn't get us out of here before 10 o'clock. That's my goal, but I'm looking for a motion for adjournment. Thank you very much, everyone.
Move to adjourn.
Commissioner Moss in a second.
Second.
Can we do this by hand raise? All in favor, say
Yeah.
aye.
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 Yes.
Jeff Lemire is there on yes. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. We look forward to being in touch soon.
Thank you.
Good
Bye.
night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Take care.